Let's enter the group chat. Dan Nathan is here, co-founder of Risk Reversal and a CNBC Fast Money contributor. David Rode, MS Now's senior national security reporter and Pulitzer Prize winner. And Nikki McCann Ramirez, politics reporter for Rolling Stone magazine. Okay, Dan. The national debt is now $40 trillion. Mortgage rates have hit 6.7%, and diesel fuel is $5 a gallon. And now, hey, let's get in a war with Canada.
Yeah. Well, I think diesel is the most important thing there, right? If you think about what touches Americans every day, yeah, we have this affordability and this housing crisis, that sort of thing, but there's not much that's going to change that and kind of get that, moving anytime soon. And so you think about diesel and how important it is for manufacturing and moving everything around. It's really important to the ag culture, farmers, that sort of thing. But picking a fight with our second largest trade partner is just goofy, right? If we go back to last year when this trade war started, it wasn't just with our adversaries, it started with our allies, right? And maybe this is more about the USMCA, which was basically this new agreement that ripped up the old agreement.
And it was really good. Yeah, it was NAFTA 2.0.
Right, and it looked a lot like NAFTA.
Yes, but I've said it before, I think it was one of the best things Jared Kushner did.
Yeah, so what's interesting to me about what they are tariffing right now, so $20 billion, that's not a whole heck of a lot, right? So just do the math here. It's more the signaling, I think. And so you just said Jan 1, that's when the real stuff comes in, right? That's, steel and it's autos, that sort of thing. And that's where our economies are really tightly connected there. So I don't think we're ever going to get to that January 1st thing. I think what Mark Carney is doing is not too different, believe it or not. I know there's a horrible headline, not too different than what the Iranian leadership is doing. It's not too different what the Chinese are doing. Trump went over there to talk trade to Beijing. Nothing came of it. President Xi is meant to come here and talk trade, among other things. Nothing will come of that. They're all going to wait it out until November, and they see how things shake out in the midterm. So I think the waiting game is something that world leaders are going to do because they know that Trump will chicken out. It's been documented like again and again and again. And the last thing I want you guys to get into, we have Pulitzer Prize winner here, that sort of thing, is that we, for all intents and purposes, lost the trade war with China. China move their exports from us to other places, which actually gives them more influence away from the United States. And they are not buying our soybeans. We are not having access to the extent we would like as far as rare earths and magnets and all that sort of stuff. So at the end of the day, this trade stuff, I think trade wars are good and easy to win. They're not proving out to be that way.
They're not buying our soybeans. Trump is now saying we're going to be buying our beef from Brazil. So if Democrats cannot figure out how to win votes from farmers, well, then that's on them because it's there for the picking.
Yeah, I think Dan is completely correct that the thing we need to be looking at here is how this is going to affect the USMCA negotiations. Mostly because NAFTA, the USMCA, those were agreements crafted from the idea that the US, Canada, and Mexico were all friends, that we all had similar interests in mind, and that this was supposed to be a beneficial free trade agreement. At this point, the Trump administration is renegotiating from an adversarial position. Mexico and Canada are going to come into these negotiations feeling protectionist, feeling like they need to extract concessions from the United States that could protect them from future incursions like this one, future rogue actions like the ones the Trump administration is taking. And we're seeing sort of this reckless abandon for even protection of some of the stronger industries within the United States. When I was down in Texas at the beginning of the year talking to ranchers and farmers, one of the things I heard repeatedly was that Texas cattle was in a very strong position, that they were not as worried as much as farmers and agricultural producers in the Rio Grande Valley. And what are we seeing now? The president is directly cutting one of the stronger sectors of a voting bloc that he needs to win and needs to maintain if Republicans have any hope of advancing themselves in these midterms. So I think other countries are looking at this with the impression that the U.S. is not only no longer a reliable ally, but an unreliable economic partner. And that is how they're going to negotiate future trade agreements.
An unreliable economic partner, and one that doesn't understand our economic power. Dan made the point earlier, you almost have to liken Canada's position to Iran's, because in both cases, the president is misdiagnosing what our power is. He seems to think because we're the strongest, because we're the toughest, because we're the best, you're just going to have to kneel down and take it. Well, they're not.
They're not, and that's the problem. And I'll use the word arrogance here. There was an arrogance about Iran. They were just going to cave, and there's an arrogance now about Canada.
Well, how about the word ignorance?
I would agree, and I'm actually grateful as the non-economic expert here. In June, in the Oval Office, Trump said This is base economics, but he said, we don't need anything that Canada has. We don't need anything that Mexico has, but they need everything we have. We have, as you said, a $700 billion a year in trade with Canada. And overall, we import $3.4 trillion. So China, we did. Trump lost. He blinked with China. So it's a fundamental misunderstanding of economics that's so surprising. And we were talking about before we started, who does this hurt? Susan Collins in Maine. Because
Mike Rogers in Michigan.
And Mike Rogers in Michigan. Maine, I'm from Maine. We was just up there this weekend. Canadian tourists haven't been showing up for the last 2 years because they didn't like being called the 51st state. Maine gets power from Canada. Maine dairy farmers sell milk. It's the same dynamic in Michigan, huge amounts of car production together with Canada. So it's the president, ignorant, arrogant, mistaken, but just bad decisions that are just fundamentally wrong economically.
And if I may very quickly, to the point of what position Canada is in all of this, Carney actually has a very strong point of leverage, which is that the United States imports a ton of oil from Canada at a moment where Iran is threatening to once again militarily shut down the Strait of Hormuz to 0% transit. Gas prices are already up. If Carney wants to extract pain amongst the American consumer, he can implement retaliatory tariffs on energy. And what happens then?
And let's be clear, it's also hurting Canada. All of this hurts all of us collectively. But I want to share a little bit of how Republicans are trying to distance themselves from Trump economically, or at least spin this. And I want to specifically share how South Carolina Senator Tim Scott how he's framing it.
Accumulate the weight of inflation at the end of the Biden years, over $1,100 of lost spending power. President Trump inherited a weak economy and has built a resilient, strong economy with our wages going up and our costs flattening.
For fact's sake, when Donald Trump took office in 2025, inflation was 3.1%. It is now 3.4%. Gas is now $1 higher than it was 1 year ago. And the cost of Trump's tariffs on American households is now more than $1,000 per year. We are nearly 2 years into Donald Trump's second term, and he's blaming our current economic reality on Joe Biden.
Yeah, right. Well, that stuff should be
Tell
left.
me the voter who's buying that.
Well, a Fox News voter. I mean, so to come on Meet the Press.
Definitely.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, they don't really care. They've been voting against their best interests for 10 years now, if you think about it, or at least, the first Trump administration. And now, I mean, he's convinced them, don't look here, look there. And we know that hurt the Biden administration, right? When you talk about where inflation was and what it took to get back down there, you could make arguments that first 2 years of the Biden administration, which was really a baton passing of the last year, obviously COVID, with President Trump, we didn't know where we were. It's fiscal, it's monetary stimulus, it was everything. And that caused inflation. And I think if you look back and you look at all the fiscal stimulus that was given to businesses, that was given to individuals, you'd say in the heart of what we were doing in that tornado, it all made sense. So we dealt with inflation into 2022. It came down significantly, to your point, to 3.1%. It is inflated because 10% of that government debt that we've been talking about, $40 trillion, has accrued in the last year and a half under the Trump administration. If it continues to go that way, financing that debt, we're not talking about what Treasury Secretary Bessent is saying, which is entirely intellectually dishonest, okay? That they're going to grow their way out of this debt. Well, at the expense of food assistance and health care for some of the most vulnerable people that are voting for Trump and Tim Scott and all these other folks. So I don't think Meet the Press viewers buy any of this stuff. I think Fox News, those viewers are conditioned to believe this sort of stuff.